Hello, 10th grade students. So, you learned a little bit about checking accounts last week. So, today we're going to talk about how checking accounts work. Have you ever gotten a check and wondered, how does this go from me to my bank and back to that person's bank? Or maybe you don't have a lot of familiarity with checking accounts or checkings. You don't even know how to fill out a check or a deposit slip. And that's what we're going to do today. So, first thing let's walk through is what all is on our checking account page. All right. So we got a check right here. We'll stop at the top. We got the date. All right. And then we call this the payment line where you're writing out who you're going to make a payment to. Then we have right here the amount of the payment, which you'd write in number form. Here, line 4, we have the where you write it in words. All right. Down here we have the memo. This is optional. You can write stuff here if you don't want to. If you're paying a bill, you might write the account number, a part of the account number. If you were sending somebody a check for their birthday, you might write happy birthday or something like that. And then here we have where you sign it. All right. And then last but not least are these numbers at the bottom. And you're going to see later why these are really important. Here you have your bank routing number. Think of it as your bank's social security number. It's the way for people to know which bank you bank with. And it separates all banks apart. And each bank has their own routing number. In the middle, or somewhere right here, you'll have your checking account number. Um, so the when the computer reads it, they'll know it's this bank, which right here, small community bank, and then they'll know your account number, whoever's account number was. And then last, which sometimes here and sometimes not, you have the checking account number, which matches up with the number up here. It doesn't in this example, but that's the way it typically does. All right, so that's what we got so far. So when we write a check, all right, we're going to talk about going from the top to the bottom. You can see we have everything we had in our last example right here, right? We got the name area, whose name's on the check. We got the pay to the order area. We got the place to write the check and words, place to write in numbers. We got our date, signature, and there's that memo again. You always have your financial institution's names there. So let's just go through how you do it, right? Top to bottom, right? Fill in the date, write the name of the payee. That's who you're writing the check to. You're going to write the check out in numeric form. All right, that's in the box. You're going to do the number. Then you're going to write the check amount in words. All right. And then you're going to write in the memo if you need to, who that's going to, and then you sign your check. And that's how you do a check. So let's go look at an example here and walk through that again. All right. So you'd fill in the date. There's your date right there. So it's going top to bottom. Write the name of our payee. This one's to Royal Apartments. Then we go over here and write the amount paid. Okay. Some people would suggest if you're writing the amount paid, go over here to the left as much as possible. So if somebody gets your checks or something like that, they don't accidentally have a way to go back and fill in more information. All right. And then you're going to write the amount out alphabetically. All right. So you can see there at $1,500. And a lot of times people write and no over $100. So you can see that amount right there, which we see right here on this account, and no 100s for the zero part. I know this one didn't. All right. Then we have our memo little spot right here. All right, so we come down to our memo, and you can see this one right here. They put for rent. You can write for whatever applies to you, and then they signed it. All right, that easy. All right, before we move on, just a couple just tidbits to think about. All right, you don't want to have a check already signed by you and nothing else filled in, because if somebody got the check, they could fill in the other information, and they could do some damage before you realize it. You also ideally don't want to sign a check and write it out to cash, because then somebody could just endorse the back of the check and use it. All right, so make sure you're always clear who you're writing the check to. So that's how you write a check. All right. We're going to come back to these numbers here at the bottom, which are really important here in just a second, because that's going to explain how the check goes from you to somebody else. So let's say you get a check. All right, it's your birthday, or in a couple years you graduate, and somebody's giving you a check. Okay, so you go take your check and you deposit it at your bank. Okay, your bank is going to encode it. They're going to endorse it. All right. So at the bottom of that check, they'll endorse it on the back of it, and they're going to send your bank to the Federal Reserve. Okay. The Federal Reserve, also known as the Fed, is a bank for banks. All right. It's our central bank. All right. It's easier to send the checks to a central location than to try to send them a bunch of different places. So if you bank at XYZ Bank will take all the checks they've gotten in deposits that aren't for their bank, and they'll send it to the Federal Reserve. All right. So Federal Reserve, all right, they'll get it. All right. They get to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, which is a clearinghouse, they're going to read that information at the bottom. Remember your routing number, your checking account number. They'll read that information, and then they'll know to send your check to whatever bank it goes to. So in our example, you got a check for your graduation. You deposited. All right. We'll say it was from your great aunt Susie. All right. So here the Federal Reserve is going to read wherever Susie, her check bank account, her bank's routing number is, and then they're going to send it to Aunt Susie's bank. All right. So Aunt Susie's bank gets it, they encode it, and then they'll deduct the amount from Aunt Susie's checking account. Now you can see this takes a couple of days or so, and a lot of this now is done electronically. The key is these bottom numbers. All right. For example, I had to pay my cable bill, and I'm probably old school. I write some checks, and I went into the cable office, and I wanted to pay it, and they took me out to the machine. I just placed my check in there, and it literally just read the information because it needs that routing number and the account number, which is really important for it. All right, so let's go back to the example of you are depositing money. So let's talk about how to actually fill out a deposit slip. Okay, see, we got this is a blank deposit slip you could get at a bank. You fill in the date, your name, usually a spot here for your address. This one just doesn't here. Maybe your account number. Sometimes your account number's right here. Spot for your signature, and then over here is this box of how we fill in the deposit slip. You got a spot for currency. That would be bills or coins you're deposited. Any checks you get from somebody you can list there. Subtotal, that's when you add up your currency and your checks. And if you're going to get any cash back, you would write that amount there. Sometimes you don't get cash back, so sometimes people just draw a line through there. And then you have your total deposit. So let's kind of walk through that step by step. If it's a blank one, you provide any personal information, that'd be like your name and address. You fill in any of the additional details that might be there, like the date or something like that. You would list the account on your deposit. So we start on the left side, that information. We go to the right side, we're working our way down. Fill in the cash. You list checks individually. So if you had, one or two checks, you'd list those amounts out. A question that might arise is, what if I have more checks than they have space there for? Sometimes on the back of the deposit slip, they'll give you room, and you can just bring that amount over and fill it in. Um, then you're going to add up the deposits, all your checks and your cash for your subtotal. All right. If you get cash back or you're going to withdraw any money, you put that in the less cash part and you calculate the total deposit. And then, if necessary, you'd sign your deposit. If you're getting cash back, they're going to make you sign your deposit because that way it gives them records. So, just here's a couple of examples I found online. You can see we got the date right here. They already had the address and information right there. All right. The account number was already down here. There's that bank routing number. Um, and then they wrote their cash. They listed the three checks. There's their subtotal. They won $100 cash back, and there's their grand total of $924. And you can see that's where they signed their name right there. Okay. Here's another one. It's just like the one we had earlier. The account number's here. They signed because they got cash back. Doesn't have a place for the address on this one. There's their name and their date. No cash on this one. All right. But they listed the two checks they deposited. There's a subtotal. There's the less cash they wanted back. And then finally, there's their grand total of their deposit. So that is how checking accounts